The last thing I remember before the explosion was my team's faces. They were looking at me, not running to help me, not calling for a medic, just watching. I woke up in a concrete cell. No windows, no name, no rank. Just a number painted on the wall. Back home, they told my mother I was dead. They gave her a folded flag. They gave her a tombstone. They gave her a lie. For 10 years, I rotted in that prison, while the men who left me behind went on with their lives, got promotions, gave interviews, shook the president's hand. But I survived. I escaped, and I came home. And the moment I saw their names in the headlines, I knew exactly what I had to do. If you woke up one day, after everything was taken from you, and found out the people who were supposed to have your back were the ones who destroyed your life, what would you do? Would you walk away, or would you make sure the truth came out no matter what? Tell me in the comments right now. I read every single one. And before we go any further, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Stories like this one drop every week, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Hit like if you're already hooked. Let's get into it. My name is Marcus Cole. I'm 30 years old, but there are mornings I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the man staring back at me. Not because of what war did to my body, though it did plenty, but because of what betrayal does to a person's soul. It hollows you out, leaves you walking around like a ghost wearing your own skin. I want to tell you my story, all of it. The parts they put in the report, the parts they buried, and the parts they hoped would rot in a foreign prison along with me. Because the truth has been locked up long enough, and I'm the only one left who can set it free. I grew up in a small town in rural Ohio, Millfield, population just under 2,000 if you count the cows. My dad, Harold Cole, worked the overnight shift at a paper mill for 26 years. My mom, Diane, was a school nurse. They weren't wealthy people, but they were the kind of people who paid every bill on time, kept the porch light on, and never once let me go to bed without telling me they loved me. I was the first in my family to consider college, but honestly, I wasn't built for sitting in classrooms. What I was built for, what I'd always felt in my chest since I was a kid watching old war movies with my grandfather, was service. My grandfather, Eldon Cole, had served in Vietnam. He never talked much about what he saw there, but the way he carried himself, quiet, steady, like a man who'd been tested and hadn't been found wanting. I wanted that. I wanted to know what I was made of. I enlisted in the Army at age 18, graduated top of my class at basic, earned my Ranger tab by 21. By 23, I was assigned to a Special Operations Unit, Task Force 7, operating out of a base I'm not going to name in a country I'm not going to specify. That's still classified. What isn't classified is what they did to me. The men I served with, my team, they were my brothers, or so I believed. Staff Sergeant Derek Holt was our team leader, sharp as a blade, cool under fire, the kind of man you'd follow into hell because you were certain he'd find a way back out. There was Corporal James Waverly, we called him Wavy, who could crack a joke in the middle of a firefight and somehow make you less afraid. And then there was Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Cross, our commanding officer, the man with the plan. Always the man with the plan. I trusted all of them with my life. That was my first mistake. It was a Tuesday in late October when everything changed. I remember the cold, unexpected for that region, biting and damp, the kind of cold that gets inside your joints. We had a mission. Intel suggested a high-value target was moving through a small village 30 kilometers north of our position. The plan was simple. Small team insertion, confirm the target, extract, clean, quiet. But 2 hours before launch, something felt off to me. The intel had come through a back channel, not standard procedure. The extraction coordinates had been updated twice in 48 hours, and both times the changes came directly from Lieutenant Colonel Cross, bypassing the usual chain. I raised it with Holt. He told me to focus. He said Cross had it handled. I should have trusted my gut. We inserted at 0200 hours. The village was quiet, too quiet. And then we were taking fire from a position that shouldn't have known we were there. Someone had told them we were coming. I took cover behind a stone wall and looked back for the rest of my team. They were retreating. Standard. You fall back, regroup, come in from another angle. Except they kept going. I called out on comms. Nothing but static. I called Holt's name. Silence. And then I saw it. In the split second before the blast, I saw Holt look back at me from 50 meters away. He saw me pinned. He saw I was alive, and he kept running. The explosion came from my left, a secondary device. I went down hard. I woke up in a stone room. My hands were bound. My left leg was broken in 2 places. My right ear was ringing. Damage from the blast that turned out to be permanent. I had no weapon, no comms, nothing but the clothes on my back and the slow, dawning horror of understanding what had happened. They'd left me, not accidentally, not because they couldn't find me. They'd left me because they knew exactly where I was, and they chose to walk away. Year 1 in captivity, I was angry. Blazing, consuming anger that kept me warm when they cut the heat. I used it like fuel. I did push-ups until my arms gave out. I memorized every crack in every wall. I made plans. Year 2, the anger started to cool into something worse, despair. I would go days without speaking because there was no one to speak to. My guards were rotating conscripts who'd been told I was an enemy spy. They didn't hate me personally. They just didn't see me as a person at all. I was a number, an asset, a problem to be managed. By year 3, I started having conversations with people who weren't there, with my mother, with my grandfather, Eldon Cole, with the version of myself who'd been 18 years old and full of purpose, standing in line at the recruitment office. I told that kid things I wish someone had told me, but I also asked him questions I couldn't answer. Was it worth it? Was any of it worth it? There was a low point. I won't give you the exact details because some things are private even now, where I made peace with the idea of dying in that room. I'd been in captivity for 4 years. My leg had healed badly, and I walked with a limp. I'd lost 30 pounds, and I had stopped believing anyone was coming for me because no one was. The government didn't know I was alive, or if they did, they had reasons to pretend they didn't. What pulled me back from that edge was a letter, not one I received, one I wrote, in my head, over and over every night for 3 weeks because I had no paper, a letter to my mother. In that letter, I told her I was still alive. I told her I hadn't forgotten her face. I told her that if I ever got out of this room, I was going to find a way to bring her the truth. And I promised her that I wasn't done yet. That promise saved my life. In year 7, I got a cellmate, a man named Tariq, mid-50s, soft-spoken, with a gray beard and eyes that had seen worse things than mine. He was an interpreter for a Western intelligence organization. Again, he wouldn't say which one. He'd been compromised. Again, he wouldn't say how, and ended up in the same concrete world I inhabited. Tariq spoke 6 languages. He was calm in a way that had long since stopped being peace and become something more like acceptance. But he also had information, and over months of careful, whispered conversation, he gave me pieces of a picture I'd been trying to assemble in the dark. He told me about a weapons procurement deal that had been quietly negotiated around the time of my mission, a deal involving certain American military contractors and certain officials who didn't want their names anywhere near it. He told me that my unit had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, that we'd been operating near a facility that was being used as a transfer point, and he told me that at least one senior American officer had been aware of the deal and had been protecting it, Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Cross. Cross hadn't just abandoned me to save his own skin from a firefight. He'd arranged for the mission to go sideways specifically because I'd been asking questions about the facility coordinates in the days before. I'd flagged the anomalies up the chain without realizing the chain was compromised. Cross had been tipped off that I was close to connecting dots he needed unconnected. He tried to have me killed. When that didn't work, he'd settled for having me buried, officially dead, while he went home and collected his career. Tariq died in year 8, a respiratory infection that the guards didn't bother treating. I sat with him through his last night, holding his hand and listening to his breathing slow. He'd asked me, in our last real conversation, to do something with what he'd told me, to make it mean something. I told him I would. Before he died, he told me one more thing, something he'd been holding back, something he wasn't sure was relevant until he realized he wasn't going to leave that prison alive. He told me there was a document, a single encrypted communication between Cross and a private defense contractor sent the night before my mission. In that message, Cross had signed off on what he called operational restructuring, and the attached file contained names, my name, the mission coordinates, the back-channel intel source. It was, essentially, a signed order for my disposal. Tariq had seen a printed copy once, years ago, in the hands of an intelligence official he'd been working with. He didn't know where the original was, but he knew it existed, and he knew that if it ever surfaced, it would destroy Cross and everyone connected to him. I memorized every detail he gave me. I wrote nothing down. I had no paper, and even if I had, the guards went through everything. I just committed it to memory, name by name, date by date, every piece of the puzzle. Because someday I was getting out of there, and when I did, I was going to need every piece. The escape itself took 18 months of preparation and 2 minutes of execution. I won't walk you through every detail, both for my own legal protection and because, honestly, some of it I'm not proud of. Survival requires things of you that don't fit neatly into a story about who you thought you were. What I'll tell you is this. I came out through a drainage channel at 3 in the morning in near-zero temperatures, bleeding from a cut on my forearm, and I walked 15 miles through terrain I'd been mapping in my head for years before I found a road. I flagged down a vehicle. The driver was a local farmer who was, to put it plainly, terrified of me. I didn't blame him. I looked like a corpse that changed its mind. I made it to an American consulate 3 days later. The first officer who saw me, a young woman, maybe 25, with a State Department lanyard, looked at my face and went pale. I gave my name and my service number. She typed it into a database. I watched her face change when the result came up. She said quietly, "Sir, according to our records, you're..." "Dead," I said. "I know. I've been working on a correction." I was flown back to the United States 48 hours later. I was met at Andrews Air Force Base with a medical team, 2 JAG officers, and a man from the Defense Intelligence Agency who shook my hand with both of his and looked at me the way people look at something they can't quite believe is real. My mother got a phone call that night. When she answered and heard my voice, she didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, "Baby." Just that, one word. And I held the phone against my ear and didn't trust myself to speak, because if I started crying, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop. Raymond Cross, by the time I came home, was a retired two-star general. He sat on the boards of 2 defense contracting firms, gave speeches at military galas, and had a book out, a memoir about leadership under pressure. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. Derek Holt had left the service and gone private sector, security consulting for a firm that, notably, did significant business with one of Cross's boards. James Waverly had stayed in the Army and made Sergeant First Class. He'd been promoted twice since the mission. Both times the recommendation letters had Cross's signature. They had built very comfortable lives on the foundation of my death. When I started talking to federal investigators, and I did, because the DIA contact opened a door that I intended to walk through, I learned that I wasn't the only thread they'd been pulling. Tariq's old intelligence contacts had been quietly building a case for years. The document he'd described to me? It existed. It had been sitting in a classified archive misfiled under a decommissioned operation code for almost a decade. A junior analyst had flagged it 8 months before my escape. They'd been building the case ever since. I was the last piece they needed, a living witness. The federal proceedings were not public at first, but they became public. These things always do. And the day that Cross's name appeared in the news, the day the headline read, "Retired General Charged in Connection with Unlawful Abandonment and Conspiracy," I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table in Millfield, Ohio, drinking coffee from the same mug she'd had since I was 12 years old. She read the headline over my shoulder. She put her hand on my back and didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Is it over?" I thought about it. I said, "The worst part, yeah." The congressional hearing was televised. Cross sat behind the table in a gray suit, looking smaller than his portrait, and gave non-answers in the careful language of a man who had spent a career learning how to say nothing with great authority. Holt took a plea deal that required full cooperation. Waverly testified for the prosecution. And I sat in the witness chair for 4 hours. I told them everything Tariq had told me. I told them what I'd seen on the night of the mission. I told them about the static on the comms, and Holt's face, and the explosion, and the 10 years in a concrete room that followed. I spoke for the record, clearly and without flinching, because Tariq had asked me to make it mean something, and a man's last request deserves to be honored. When I was done, the committee chairwoman looked at me over her glasses and said, "Corporal Cole, on behalf of the United States Congress, I want to formally acknowledge," and she said some things after that, official things, important things, but honestly, the words blurred a little. What I was thinking about in that moment was a stone room, a crack in the wall shaped like a river, the sound of my own voice talking to people who weren't there. I was thinking about Tariq. Cross was convicted on 4 counts, including conspiracy and dereliction of duty resulting in unlawful imprisonment. He was sentenced to 11 years. The judge cited the duration of my captivity in her remarks. Holt received a suspended sentence and a dishonorable discharge. Waverly, in exchange for his full cooperation, received immunity. I have complicated feelings about that last one. I'll probably always have complicated feelings about it. My rank was officially restored. My record was cleared. The Department of Defense issued a formal apology, a real one, 3 pages, signed by the Secretary himself. They upgraded my Bronze Star to a Silver Star and issued back pay for 10 years of service. My mother jokes that it was the most expensive apology in military history. I still have the limp. My right ear still rings on bad days. a constant high tone like the world is trying to remind me of something. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and feel the dimensions of that stone room around me before I remember where I am. But I also wake up in a house in Ohio with a porch light on and a coffee maker that starts automatically and a dog named Sergeant that takes up 2/3 of my bed and absolutely does not care about my military rank or my ordeal or anything except whether I'm about to open the treat drawer. Last spring, I went back to the Millfield cemetery, to the grave with the empty casket and my name on it. My mother had kept it immaculate, fresh flowers, trimmed grass, a small American flag. Standing there in front of my own headstone, I didn't know whether to feel grief or gratitude or something in between. I chose gratitude. I've been choosing it deliberately every day since. Not because what happened to me was okay, it was not okay, it will never be okay, but because the alternative is to let the men who took 10 years from me take the rest of my life too, and they don't get to have that. That part is mine. I'm telling you this story not because I want your sympathy, though I appreciate it, and not because I want to be defined by what was done to me. I'm telling you this story because somewhere out there, right now, there is someone sitting in a place they shouldn't be, holding on by a thread, making promises to themselves in the dark, and I want that person to know the thread holds, the promise matters, and the truth, no matter how long it takes, no matter how many people worked to bury it, has a way of coming to the surface, just like I did.